Hello and welcome to this presentation on Chapter 27 of Teach Yourself Grammar, which is about punctuation. So, some context for our discussion of punctuation. First, it's important to understand that the emphasis on punctuation and mechanics, so things like spelling, capitalization, and so on, comes out of the prescriptive tradition, which we discussed in Chapter 1. It's an area of focus for people like editors and teachers, that is, those who are essentially tasked with standardizing writing and teaching people those standards. Now, in writing, standardization helps readers and focuses the attention on the subject matter, which is a very good thing. So that although we have learned that, as the descriptive tradition shows us, punctuation is essentially all about conventions, which are like the rules of traffic and not laws of nature. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because if we didn't have rules of traffic, then driving a car would be a very chaotic and confusing thing. So, an overview. Punctuating texts, which simply means inserting marks to guide a reader's understanding of that text, follows three basic principles. First, punctuation corresponds to the rhythm of spoken language. Secondly, those rhythms in turn correspond to grammatical structures. And then thirdly, some rules are purely conventional. They simply have to be learned by heart. And the strategies for correct punctuation, to help yourself have better punctuation, basically correspond to those three principles. That is, first, it always helps to read your writing aloud. And doing that alone, you will catch about 90 to 95% of all grammatical errors, including those of punctuation. Secondly, beyond that, you should acquire knowledge of grammatical structures, which is, of course, what you have been doing. If you have made it to Chapter 27, then presumably you have done that. And thirdly, you then just need to learn and apply some conventions that govern punctuation. So first, there is end-of-sentence punctuation. This includes things like question marks, exclamation marks, and most importantly, periods, which all correspond to long pauses in speech. So taking a closer look at the period, this is used for sentences that essentially make statements. So they don't make commands or ask questions, but make statements. The minimal requirement for a sentence, which would then end with a period, would be to have at least one well-formed independent clause, which, as we have learned, just means a subject and predicate. Subordinate clauses of all sorts require a matrix clause, an independent clause within which they are nested. So relative and adverbial clauses especially cannot stand on their own. And also a second principle here is that two conjuncts can't appear in separate sentences. So they are conjoined, they are coordinate structures, and therefore cannot be separated by a period or other full mark of punctuation. So taking a look at an example like our biggest sale ever, well, this wouldn't work because there is no predicate. Our biggest sale ever what? There is no verb here, no verb phrase. Which starts today. Here we have a relative clause without a matrix clause. And so come see us now. So is a coordinating conjunction which links to conjuncts, so that cannot stand on its own. It needs another independent clause for that to make sense. So we could just revise the whole thing to say, our biggest sale ever starts today, so come see us now. The period also signals abbreviation, as for example in doctor, so Dr. Oz, the period there after doctor. Now, taking a look at some marks of internal punctuation within the sentence, we have two medium-length pauses, the first of which is the colon, and colons are used at the end of a clause, and they indicate that the words which follow after the colon are logically related to what has already been said. They're commonly used to introduce lists and quotes, and just one thing to remember with them is not to use them in the middle of a clause. So don't say something like, 3 common fruits are, colon, apples, oranges, and pears, but rather, 3 common fruits are apples, oranges, and pears. No colon in there. And the second mark of punctuation, which is of medium length, is the semicolon. And semicolons are used in 2 places. So first of all, they're used in place of a period when 2 clauses are logically related. And secondly, they're used to separate elements in a list if those already have commas in order to avoid comma confusion. The next mark of internal punctuation is the comma, which are essentially the mark that indicates the least amount of a pause in a sentence. So commas are also the most misused mark of punctuation, and they have 3 basic functions. First, to set off words that disrupt the normal flow of a sentence. So for example, in a sentence like on Tuesday morning, comma, I leave for the Smoky Mountains, we need the comma because that adverbial prepositional phrase has been moved from the predicate to begin the sentence. As we talked about, this emphasizes the point in time at which you're going to leave for the Smoky Mountains. But because that disrupts the normal flow of the sentence, we do need a comma after it. The second function is to separate 3 or more items in a list, such as apples, comma, oranges, comma, and pears. And thirdly, they are used to join independent clauses with coordinating conjunctions. So I like apples, comma, but they prefer oranges. So a comma and a coordinating conjunction that join 2 independent clauses. 2 common errors involving comma use are, first, if the comma is used for a period, as in, please wait, the bus will be here soon, which should be, please wait, period, the bus will be here soon. So here we have 2 independent clauses, please wait, and the bus will be here soon. These should not be joined by a comma unless you insert, as we just looked at, unless you insert a coordinating conjunction. Or for that matter, a subordinating conjunction. Please wait because the bus will be here soon, or because the bus will be here soon, you should wait. And the other common error is when the period is used in place of a comma. We have discussed this earlier, and this creates what is called a sentence fragment. 2 more marks of internal punctuation are, first of all, dashes, which signal an interrupting element that comes either in the middle of a sentence or at the end. So for example, all questions, dash, factual or interpretive, dash, are welcome. So that's in the middle. Or all questions are welcome, dash, both factual and interpretive. So here the interrupting element comes at the end. And secondly, the apostrophe, which is used in 3 places. First of all, to signal omitted letters, as in contractions such as can't. Secondly, to indicate possession, as in the cat's whiskers. And thirdly, to form the plurals of lowercase letters. So in an expression like mind your P's and Q's, we would use apostrophes. And that's it for punctuation.